All right, everybody, this is the Unit 9 review video of balance of payments and foreign exchange. As promised, let's dive right in. Okay, so the first thing you need to know is the basic arguments on each side of this debate that is raging between people who promote free trade, which is basically no limitations on trade at all, no tariffs, no quotas, just let people exchange, versus protectionism, this idea that we should use strategic tariffs to protect domestic businesses. So on the free trade side, they believe that free trade is the way to go because protectionism is inefficient, right? If we protect our businesses, our firms, then we end up using our scarce resources to produce something that could be better produced somewhere else at a lower cost or a lower opportunity cost. In other words, we could be using our advanced labor force, for example, to be producing something a lot better, a lot more advanced, something we have a comparative advantage in. But that is skewed when we put tariffs on things to prop up our local businesses. Also reduces consumption. Prices will be higher, so people will spend less. Going hand in hand with that, it lowers our standard of living. We have fewer things to choose from, right? So we don't have as many imports, and then the price of those goods is more expensive because tariffs naturally raise the price of the goods that we're trying to purchase. So our buying power, our buying capacity, so to speak, is much lower. So we end up being able to buy less, and so we satisfy less of our utility as a result. And then, of course, it can trigger trade wars. We tariff them, they tariff us. We quota them, they quota us. We've seen that happen recently with China. All right, next up, protectionism is the way to go, the other side of this. And this is kind of a Trumpism, so to speak, because this is definitely what that side of our political divide, I should say, believes, right? And so protectionism is the way to go because it does a couple of things. First, we have an independent military, right? If we protect, then all of our military goods can be produced right here in the United States. So we don't have to rely on foreign nations to be suppliers of military goods, because that could be scary, right? If we go into war and they decide, hey, we're going to hold your military hostage, we're not going to supply the things you need to win this war, because we have some other end in mind, right? It gives them leverage, foreign nations leverage. It diversifies our economy. When we prop up our local firms, our local businesses, or should say domestic, not necessarily local, but nationwide within our nation, we have more diverse economy, right? We still produce coal, we still manufacture cars, but also we have these more advanced things. And the more diverse your economy is, the stronger it is against a recession, right? When one industry goes down, you have all of these other industries that can still keep our economy afloat. It protects American jobs. This is probably the one that you hear the most, right? Globalization with free trade, jobs can be outsourced very easily, and then the goods are imported in. It doesn't change anything except people lose their jobs. And so, if we tariff things, our international competitors are less likely to compete with American-produced goods. Then you're more likely going to retain American jobs. Protecting infant industries is very popular, especially things like solar power, where another nation might have a leg up on us. We can subsidize and tariff that other nation to give us a little incubator space, right, to grow that industry until we're ready to compete on an international level. And then finally, it protects wages from falling, right? If we domestically protect these firms, then we're more likely going to have stable wages. However, when there's international competition, it's just not just international competition for selling the goods, it's also international competition for the resources. Those resources are much less expensive. For example, manufacturing in Southeast Asia is much cheaper than manufacturing here in the United States. So as a result, in order for the United States to even produce anything, they have to lower wages, right? That's in that free trade market. But if we tariff things, quota things, then that's less likely to be the case, and wages will stay. So those are two basic sides, and they debate every single day. They have some merit to each of them. So, but you need to know a little bit about that. Only going to be a couple of questions on it. So let's not tarry here much longer. All right, part number two, and this is a big portion of the test, probably about 40%, I'd say, is balance of payments. So when we're looking at balance of payments, it's the accounting or the tracking of all exchanges, all buying and selling of goods and services, and all buying and selling of financial assets including money that's transferred from one to the other and income that's made from one or the other. Right? And so it's all international. Balance of payments looking at what's going out from the United States, considered outflow, and that's a debit or a negative on our economy, versus what's flowing into the United States, inflow, that's a credit or a positive in this balance of payments. Okay, so always follow the money to get those flows right and get the debit and credit right. Okay, outside of that, then you just need to memorize what goes into each of these accounts and you'll be in good shape. Okay, so our first account is the current account. Current account is the one and done section of the account. It's got several items underneath it, 3 that you need to know. The first one is the balance of trade. The balance of trade is simply exports minus imports. Now, keep in mind, we're tracking the flow, right? So exports, the goods go out. They're produced in the United States, but they're sold internationally. So the goods go out, but we're not tracking the goods. We're tracking the money. Where does the money go? The money comes in. We sell the good in an international market, and there's an inflow of income. So there's an inflow or a credit when we have an export. So it's going to be positive. Imports are the opposite, right? We buy the good and service here, right? The good comes in, that's great, but where's the money go? The money actually flows out. So it's outflow, flowing out. And so it's a debit or a negative in that balance of trade. Okay? So exports minus imports will give us our actual balance of trade. Exports are always positive, imports are always negative. We've talked about that before. But remember, if we have more imports than exports, then we have a trade deficit. And if we have more exports than imports, then we have trade surplus. In other words, if we hold a negative balance in our balance of trade, it's a deficit and vice versa. So let's look at a quick example. If the Norway buys 3 tons of natural gas from the United States, what happens? Well, Norway is buying our natural gas. So the natural gas goes from the US to Norway. But where's the money go? The money comes from Norway to the United States. So it's an inflow of money. And so that inflow is going to be a credit or a positive in our balance of trade because that is considered an export. All right, so keep that in mind. Whenever you have an exchange of a good or a service internationally, it's going to show up in the balance of trade under the current account. Okay, let's keep going. Our second category under the current account is net investment income. Net investment income, this is the income received from a prior investment. So I made an investment before, I bought a business overseas, and now I'm starting to earn dividends, we call them, or money from my investment, right? I get income from that. So that's net investment income. And you can tell this apart from net assets purchase because it's all about the income, the money I made from that investment. And I'm not just making it now, I can make it in the future as well. Okay? So the way we look at this is we look at the dividends flowing into the United States minus the dividends flowing out of the United States. In other words, when I made a prior investment, let's say, let's stick with Norway, right? I bought a ski lodge in Norway a long time ago. When I make my annual revenue from that, when they send me my money for my investment, they say, hey, we made this much profit. Here's your portion of those profits. It flows from Norway into the United States. Inflow, that's going to be a positive in our net investment income in our current account. Okay, and then there's outflow. If Norway owns a milk farm in the United States, when that milk farm declares their profits to send those dividends to their investors, they send those dividends to Norway. So that's going to be an outflow from the United States to Norway. That's going to be seen as a negative on our net investment income under our current account. So the balance or the net is the positive minus that negative there. Okay, so and remember, as long as our positives outweigh our negatives, we have a surplus in the net investment income. If our negatives outweigh our positives, then we have a deficit. Okay, let's look at a quick example. If there's a Japanese investor who receives income from a prior real estate business investment in the United States, what's going to happen? Well, they bought it, they invested in this real estate business in the United States a long time ago. But now they're getting income from that. And so it's the outflows coming from the United States to those Japanese investors. It's their income they're earning off of their investment. That outflow is going to be a negative or a debit in the net investment income and a debit in our current account, which is the larger category over above it. Okay, hopefully that makes some sense. Our final category is net transfers underneath the current account. Net transfers, we have a few things those could be. It could be donations, right? You're just giving money to a charity or to a church or something like that abroad. It could be aid, right? There's a hurricane that hits or something like that, and I want to help those people out. Or the United States government as a whole decides to help people out by giving millions of dollars of aid or something like that. And then finally, there's remittance. Remittance is this idea that, I move to another nation as an individual. I start working in that other nation, but I send money back to my family or anybody else back in my home nation. That's considered remittance, right? And so these all have positives and negatives to it. Let's look at it. So remember, it's outflow and inflow. Inflow is always positive. Outflow is always negative. Or inflow is always a credit. Outflow is always a debit. Keep that in mind. So we look at the transfers paid from the United States to foreign nations. In other words, it's flowing out from the U.S. to another nation. That's going to be, I'm sorry, it's coming in. Scratch that. Coming in. So transfers paid to the United States from a foreign nation. Read that wrong. So that's money coming in, right? The foreign nation is sending money back to the United States, or a foreign nation is helping the United States out in some way. So it's inflow. That's going to be a credit in the net transfers account, and that's going to be considered a positive. We take that minus our transfers paid to foreign nations, right? So coming from the United States to a foreign nation. So, let's look at the Mexican immigrant who lives in the United States, works on a farm, sends money back to take care of their family. That's outflow, income flowing from the United States to that Mexican family. And so that's going to be considered a negative or a debit in our net transfers. All right, so here's an example for you. If there's a Syrian immigrant living in the United States who sends their income back to the family in Syria, what is that? Well, first of all, that's a remittance, so we know it's a transfer. It's just money going, getting nothing in exchange, right? That's how we know it's a transfer. It's just money, one-way ticket. Money going out, money going to somebody, nothing's coming back. There's no exchange here, right? So they're just giving it to their family. That remittance payment is coming from the United States because they're working here, going to Syria. So it's going to be an outflow, right? And that outflow is going to be a debit or a negative in the net transfers account under the current account. Okay, now keep in mind a credit in any one of those three accounts in our trade balance of trade, in our net investment income, or our net transfers. Any one of those three things. We have a credit or a positive inflow in any one of those categories. It's going to push our current account to a surplus. It's the language they use. Right? We're going to go move towards a surplus. Or if our current account was at a zero, then one of these transactions, an inflow in any one of those three, would cause a surplus in our current account, and vice versa. If there's a debit in any one of those categories, it's going to be considered an outflow, or I'm sorry, a deficit. We're moving us towards a deficit in that current account. Hopefully that makes some sense. Let's move on to the other side of it. Balance of trade or balance of payments has two sides. Current account's one side with those three subcategories. The other side is right here. Here we go, the financial account. Financial account, thankfully, only has two categories underneath it that you need to know, and only one of them really comes up all that often. And this is the one that comes up most often. It's net assets purchase. This is the purchase or sale of an actual asset, and an asset is something that has continual earning potential, right? It can make money off of this. So I buy it now for a price, but I can make money off of it in the future because it will appreciate in value, assuming. So, for example, a bond is a great example of a financial asset, right? When we buy a bond from another nation, that's going to be an outflow in the net assets purchase because I purchased the bond. Okay, so let's take a look at this. There are two, obviously a positive and a negative, inflow and outflow. Right. So when other nations decide they want to buy United States bonds, or they want to buy a United States business, or they want to invest in United States stock, or something like that, right? The initial purchase of those things, excuse me, is going to be inflow, money coming into the United States, which is a positive in our account, right? Inflow. So let's say there's somebody who lives in Ireland who decides that they want to buy an American bond, right? Because they're saving up for their retirement. American bonds are super stable. So the purchase of that American bond or that US bond from that person in Ireland is going to be an inflow. It's money coming from Ireland to the United States. But they're not purchasing a good, they're purchasing an asset, which is going to earn them money in the future. So that doesn't fall under our current account, under our balance of trade. Instead, it falls under our financial account because it's a financial asset, right? And it's going to be positive. It's inflow, money coming from Ireland to the United States. So that's going to be the positive side of this. We take all of those inflows for the purchase of an asset, a business, a bond, a treasury, a, basically any investment in a stock falls under this category. Take that, subtract it from the purchases from the United States, where we buy somebody else's asset. So if the United States, we decide, hey, I want to buy that bowling alley in Russia, right? Then that's going to be a purchase of an asset that's going to earn me money in the future, right? So that would be outflow. The money's coming from the US to Russia to buy that bowling alley, right? I'm not making the money today. I'm going to make the money in the future as that bowling alley starts to turn in profits. That outflow is a negative in our net assets purchased because it's money flowing from the United States to Russia. So we find the net by taking the positives or the inflows minus the outflows, just like we did in every other one. Now to give you your balance. If that balance is positive, we're in a surplus. If that balance is negative, we're in a deficit. So a quick example, if a Japanese company purchases a United States company, what happens? Well, of course, that Japanese company purchasing a US company is an inflow. It's money coming from Japan to the United States, money coming in. So it's going to be a positive or a credit in the net assets purchase. And we know it's net asset purchases because they're buying something, that company, that's going to earn them money in the future. It's not just to satisfy their utility today. Okay? So just as a general cheat code for you, if you ever see a bond, a stock, or the purchase of a business, you know it's going to fall under the financial account instead of the current account there. All right. Final subcategory for the financial account is the capital account, which is the forgiveness of debt. A couple other things fall in there, but basically we look at the forgiveness of debt because it's the largest portion of this. If another nation forgives our debt, we owe them something, but they're like, you know what? You don't have to pay us anymore through negotiations. Then that's considered inflow. Even though no money's coming in, money that was going to flow out that doesn't flow out. So we consider that inflow. So that's going to be positive. We take that and we subtract from that all of the negatives, right? When the United States forgives a foreign nation of debt, when we do that, then that is considered an outflow, money coming from the US going to that foreign nation. And that's going to be a negative. So we find our balance by taking whoever forgives us minus whoever we forgive. And that is going to give us our balance in the capital account. So, for example, if the United States forgives the Greek debt owed to us, what happens? Well, that's considered outflow. It's money we could have gotten, but we don't get anymore because we forgave it. Outflow is going to be a debit in the capital account, which is a subcategory of the financial account. Now, keep in mind, a credit in any one of those two categories, net asset purchases or capital account, is going to move the entire financial account towards a surplus. Vice versa, a negative or an outflow or a debit in any one of those two categories is going to push our financial account towards a deficit. Now keep in mind, if the current account is in surplus, then the financial account is in deficit. Those two sides have to balance. So if there's a surplus of 500 on one side, then there must be a deficit of 500 on the other. Take a look at an example. This is your STAT 9.1. Pull up a pen here. There we go. All right, so I have a couple of things here. Let's see if we can put them in the correct categories and move on from there. So first, it says Americans purchase $500 of French chocolate, okay, and we sell $200 worth of American-made socks. So if the Americans are buying French chocolate, we assume it's from France. That's considered an import. That's going to be negative 500, right? It's outflows, money coming from the United States going to France. So that is going to be a debit in that account. However, we sold $200 worth of American-made socks, presumably to other nations. So that's going to be positive. So we have a positive of 200, right? In other words, we have a credit of $200 worth of socks because of that inflow. We sold them socks, we got money. So the difference between those two is going to be negative 300, and that's going to go where? Well, what are we talking about? We're talking about the exchange of goods and services, imports and exports. And so this negative number should actually go right here under balance of trade in our current account. That's going to be negative 300. Okay, let's look at the next one. The Norwegians receive dividend payments on their investment. They're receiving money on investments they made prior. So it's going to be net investment income. It's money they're making off of a previous investment, right? So Norwegians receive dividend payments of $200, but the United States receives dividend payments of $100 from their investments they made abroad. So if the Norwegians are receiving dividend payments from U.S. companies, that's outflow, money coming from the United States to Norway. So it's going to be negative 200. There we go. The United States receives $100 in investments from, or in dividends from investments abroad. We have $100 coming back in. So it's going to be plus 100. Or in other words, we're going to have a credit of 100 because it's inflow, money coming in from our previous investments. So the balance of those two is going to be negative 100, and that's going to go right under here under net investment income. Our next one, Americans transfer $600 to other nations in remittances. In other words, we live in those foreign nations and we send money, or we live in the United States and we send money back to our family in those foreign nations. That's $600 of outflow, money coming from the United States going to other nations. So it's a debit of 600. And then other nations send $400 back to the United States for the same reasons, remittance. So that's going to be inflow, money coming in. So that's going to be 400 positive. So our balance is going to be the difference between those two is going to be negative 200. We pop that up here in our net transfers because we know remittances of transfers. There's no exchange going on here, so it's money going from one place to another. And then that's going to give us our current account balance, negative 600. Now, what's going to be the balance or the total of our financial account? Well, if you've been paying attention here, you'll know that those two have to balance out. So we know that this has to equal 600. So we kind of have a cheat code here, right? We know we're going to have a surplus in the financial account, 600, because we have a deficit of 600 in the current account. All right, so let's check out these two and hopefully they'll give us the answers we need. Let's say the United States or Japan, purchases $1,000 of American bonds. Japan's purchasing American bonds or purchasing American assets. That's going to be inflow, money coming in from Japan to the United States. That's going to be positive or a credit of $1,000. Okay. And Americans, we purchase $500 worth of businesses, presumably abroad, right? So that's us purchasing other businesses, $500 worth of businesses. So that's outflow. That's going to be negative 500. The difference between those two is going to be positive 500, and that goes right here under net assets purchase because I know these businesses are going to make money for us in the future. These bonds are going to make money in the future, right? So it's something I purchased today as continual earning potential. Final one. The United States forgives $400 worth of foreign debt. That's negative 400, right? We forgave their debt. It's outflow. But they forgave $500 of our debt. That's inflow. So we have plus 500. The balance between these two is going to be plus 100, and that's going to be in our capital account because we know that's where forgiveness of debt goes. And bada boom, bada bing, 500 plus 100 equals 600. We have our balance of payments. Financial account is in surplus, which means our current account is in deficit, right? Any changes to any one of these things is going to move all of these numbers, right? Move our totals towards surplus or towards deficit, depending on where we originally start. Okay, that's everything you need to know about balance of payments. Let's keep rolling into our foreign exchange market. Okay. Actually, you know what? We're going to stop right there, export this video, and then we'll have a foreign exchange video. It'll be separate. All right, enjoy.